In the dark shadows, in the white cold, fearlessly we search for knowledge new and old. We drink the strong spirits and read ancient tomes. The order of the Abracast. We are the brave and bold.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar.
Stigmata Studios presents The Jinn Jihad. The Jinn Jihad kicks your face with myths, mysteries, epic battles, suicide bombers, quirky characters, and divine power armor. In this epic graphic novel, the warrior archangels descend on a city in chaos. It's all-out war. The non-standard assembly battles an ancient terrorist organization and their ultimate weapon, a corrected, magically enhanced, unstoppable monster, the Jinn. This graphic novel is a wild ride. It's one part distant Arab myth, one part Old Testament angelic vengeance, and one part unique heroic tough guys. Available on Amazon. Get more info on the Jinn Jihad and other titles at stigmatastudios.com.
As a private in Sergeant Band's platoon in France, and as one who went through the battle in St. Julien in April of 1915, and seeing Sergeant Band's picture in the mirrors missing, I thought it my duty to write and let you know that Sergeant Band was killed 24th of April in St. Julien, as most of his platoon and the men of C Company were captured. I am sorry for you all, and you have my deepest sympathy. He died, as he always wished to, a soldier's and a hero's death. Private William Freeman, June 1, 1916.
Darkness imprisoning me, all that I see, absolute horror. How can I live? How can I die? Trapped in myself, body's my holding cell.
The Abracast. Occult. History. Conspiracy. Violence.
All right, welcome to the Abracast. Just kind of off the gate, out of the gate here, off the bat, I'm kind of in a shitty mood. So this kind of fits because it, here at the Abracast, it can't all be laughing and fun and about magical rocks and kung fu. Sometimes you got to throw in a Pizzagate or an Armenian genocide to really ground things. So that's where I'm at. That's where I'm at today. Fiends of the Flesh is out. It's my first prose story, included in an anthology called Fiends of the Flesh. The link will be in the notes. You can find it on Amazon. Revenge in a Saloon Called Hell is like this fucking close to getting sent to the printers, so I'll get to tell you guys all about that for probably the next month or so. Go ahead and support the show however you can. Buying comic books is a great way to do it. If you're not down with comics, or you're some kind of fucking communist or something, you can always just share the show. You can rate and review it. That's all I'm going to say about it. So there. Last week we talked about the Stone of Destiny. and its wild journey through history. This week, however, we're going to take a look at like the nature of man, the nature of war. A wise man once said that war brings out the best and worst in humanity. We're going to be talking a lot about the worst part here coming up. I think about this story every once in a while. It's weird. It always makes me think of the beginning of this movie, this 70s, I think it was released in 1980, a movie called The Big Red One. It's a World War II movie. It's got the guy from Revenge of the Nerds in it. Lee Marvin, the fucking guy from Revenge of the Nerds, and Luke Skywalker's in this movie. And it's World War II. You probably, I don't know if you've ever seen it. It sounds like a wild lineup, but I swear to God, that's what it is. And at the beginning, it opens, and there's this giant crucifix on the battlefield. Yeah, Tarantino stole this thing for that John Carpenter's Thing remake that he just did last year or whatever. How it opens on the big crucifix. Big Red One did that first. Anyhow, it starts off with the sergeant who is actually a private in World War One. It took him all that fucking time to get promoted to a sergeant. I don't know. It seems a little crazy to me. But he kills a German, and then he goes and reports back. He reports back to like his commander or whatever, and his commander's like, "Hey man, the war's been over for like 4 hours." So I think he feels kind of bad for killing this German, like when the war was off. And the only reason I'm kind of blabbling about this is because, like, I'm going to tell a story about like it's the theme is war atrocities or like war crimes, like these fucked up things that people do during war is the main theme of this episode. And this is kind of a way to do it, because literally, that soldier didn't know that the ceasefire or whatever had been signed. He was just fighting for his life, but it wound up being, that some people would say that was like a war atrocity. But I mean, he didn't know about it or whatever. He redeems himself because he's in World War II, and he takes Luke Skywalker and the dude from Revenge of the Nerds. At the end of the war, he fucking shoots another German. And then they get word that the war has been over for 4 hours, and they go and they like feverishly work to try to save the guy's life. Like 1 minute I'm going to shoot him, and the next minute I'm gonna fucking try to save him, just because someone said, "Hey, the war's over now." Anyhow, so now that I kind of laid out this whole thing, the image of that crucifix always stuck with me on the battlefield. And, when I think of that, I always think of this story of this crucified soldier that we're going to talk about. When I think of the crucified soldier, I always think of that movie with Lee Marvin, Luke Skywalker, and the fucking guy from Revenge of the Nerds. I don't know, whatever. So mix up your gin jihad, get your gas mask going, and we're headed to the trenches of World War One, because I'm going to tell you the story of the crucified soldier. Is that what I'm doing? Yeah, that's what I'm doing. Here we go. Told you, shitty mood. Mother. Doot. All right, so World War I breaks out. From the very start of the war, there's rumors and accusations about the German army doing these war crimes against the civilians. So, August 1914, there's these Belgian refugees. Well, hold on. Okay, so before we get going here, Belgium was neutral. But the Germans were like, they even signed like some treaty or some shit or whatever. But they were like, fuck it, we need to go through Belgium. They needed to use Belgium as a shortcut because they needed the speed in order to close and conquer France. So they just go in, and later the guy's like, I don't know, whatever. It was just a piece of paper. Like, fuck you. And that's just one thing that they wind up doing that is very dubious. Very dubious. I probably should have mentioned if there are trigger warnings out there. If any of you snowflakes are Germans, you might not like what I talk about over here. So there's these Belgian refugees, and they're telling anyone that'll listen about this rape of Belgium. And like I said, even though that they were neutral, that didn't mean that they didn't have an army. But they were just like, look, we're not picking any sides, whatever. But the Germans invaded, and it started this campaign of atrocities against the civilian population. There's property was just a ton of property was destroyed. I don't know why I have many bullet points saying this because I'm going to actually break that down. But all right, so there's 6,000 Belgians that were killed outright. There was 17,700 that died in deportation and or prison. You know this forced deportation thing. You know that's fucking hard on people. Like, listen to the Armenian genocide episode. We kind of get into the logistics of how they fucking did that. I imagine these Germans were much better. 25,000 homes and 837 communities were destroyed just in 1914 alone. The one that really fucking pisses me off is they destroyed this university library that had 300,000 medieval books in it, all burned to the ground. Of course, there's rapes and sexual abuses. There's stories of sexually abused and nuns that got fucked with. They were like, hey, we heard that you were like spies, so you got to like take your clothes off. And of course, you know what you hear all the time. They bayoneted the babies. You know, whenever, like, another theme in this episode is going to be about propaganda and our like psychological need to dehumanize the people we're shooting at in order to make it okay for us to shoot at them. And you'll see this time and time again in the bayoneted babies thing, because we're like, oh my God, that bayonet probably cut through that little pink baby like butter. Another thing they'll do is they'll say, and you know, I've seen this in my lifetime, you know, when they were ramping up for Iraq Part 2, this time it's personal, or as I like to call it, Iraq Part 2, the Electric Boogaloo. You know what you heard all about, like the rape rooms and all this stuff. You have to tell us how shitty they treat their women. That'll get us going. As Americans, that's what gets us fucking going. You want to know? You want to see us go to war? You just find some fucking stories about like some rape rooms or some shit like that, or kids. You know, they're making their women into suicide bombers and all that stuff. And I'm sure it's true, whatever. But that'll get us revved up. Children with their hands cut off. So these Germans start pushing through, and even though Belgium was neutral, they did have an army, and their army actually put up a pretty good fight against these advancing Germans. And whenever the Germans were stopped or stalled by these forces, the Germans actually assumed that there was some kind of also civilian resistance. So they started coming up with this myth about Belgium civilian sharpshooters and like some sort of joint, you know, Belgium militia, and the knee-jerk reaction from these Germans were to basically a war against the civilians and the army too. And in some kind of way, it justified all kinds of heinous acts that we're going to get into right now. Of course, the British started using these incidents for propaganda. Like I mentioned before, there's like this documented need for us to be reminded and to dehumanize our enemies. And anyway, so it's like they would have like a remember Belgium, and buy your war bonds, this kind of stuff. And actually, this story of this crucified soldier actually became propaganda. So we'll get into that a little bit later. So, this is kind of just like this circular feeding the fire. Like these Germans do some fucked up shit. The British are like, hey, you guys over here, we need you to help us because these Germans are doing fucked up shit. And it's like every step of the way, they just keep doing more fucked up shit. And at the end of the war, there's this big, huge movement where they were like, hey man, we didn't really do all that fucked up shit. Like that was all just propaganda. So at the time, the Germans actually had inspectors that were like going around like looking to make sure, hey, we're just not slaughtering these people, are we? Are we? And then they're like, no, we're not slaughtering them. This guy was one of these guys were one of these civilian sharpshooters, Belgian sharpshooters that we've been telling you about. And they're like, okay, that's cool. You could have killed him and all of his family then. That's fine. So this is this propaganda war, along with what's going to come after, where everyone is kind of pointing their fingers, is actually the part where at the end of the war, where Germans were like, hey man, like literally, let's just stop telling these stories because they're just not true. Everyone just stopped telling the stories. They're like, hey man, they're probably right. This probably didn't really happen. It was like that for years. Anyhow, I'm getting ahead of myself. What's next? The Battle of Ypres. Oh, wait, hold on. Battle of Ypres. If you want to look it up, it's not. I don't know how exactly it's pronounced. I think it's pronounced Ypres. It's spelled Ypres. So I don't know. This battle, the larger battle, lasted from April 22nd to May 25th, 1915. But the battle is made up of 6 different kind of other phases of the battle. It's all lumped together. Why is this all fucked up? This is my day. This is how my day's been going. We're going to talk about the second of these battles, and this is the Battle of Saint Julien. Whenever I say Julien, I think of those fucking penguins in Madagascar. And that rat thing, the king, lemur or whatever he is. God, that fucking thing is annoying. All right, let's rewind for a minute. We're going to go back to April 22nd. And this is what the battlefield looks like. Germany is on the defensive in the west. It's fighting a war on 2 fronts at this time. Where St. Julien is was the rear of the line. It's where the 1st Canadian Division, and they had 2 French units. And these guys were like manning the back of the area. They were the line. Germany unleashed this new terrible age of warfare when it attacked these 2 French divisions with a brand new shiny chlorine gas. This first time, it was actually pretty early in World War I for them to do this, and it's important to mention at this point, it's very relevant, and it's important to mention at this point that the Germans signed the Hague Convention. So as of right now, they are breaking the rules of war and international law openly. Like I said, it's pretty early in the game. So what does chlorine gas taste like anyways? Soldiers that survived the attack said that it tasted like pineapples and pepper and had a metallic taste that stung the throat and chest. So what does chlorine gas do anyways? Chlorine gas, it reacts with the water that's in your mucus of the lungs, and it forms hydrochloric acid, which destroys living tissue. Now, this chlorine gas was pretty modest. I mean, to start out with, it was pretty shitty. I mean, no one was walking around with gas masks, but it's pretty modest because you could protect yourself against it with gas masks. So, like, shortly after this, all this was replaced with mustard gas, which is way crazier. We might get into that someday, but for this situation, this chlorine gas situation, all you need was a gas mask. The only problem is that none of these guys had gas masks because everyone had signed this thing going, yo, we're going to get into this gigantic fucking fight, but none of us should bring this gas weapons. And everyone's like, yeah, okay. And then Germany ran home and built all these fucking gas weapons. This attack was designed to get these fuckers out of their trenches, and it worked. The Canadian Highlanders, which is... Okay, let's talk about these Canadian Highlanders for a second. The 48th Highlanders of Canada, based in Toronto, after the declaration of war, 907 officers and men signed up to fight. Their motto is... I'm going to ruin this. Watch me butcher this. It's Celtic. Delius Gubra. It means faithful forever. And the cool thing about these guys is for their dress uniform, they wore kilt. They wore a kilt. So you know what they say about guys with dresses. They wear dresses because they're asking you to fuck with them about it. Okay, so these Canadian Highlanders, which were in the rear, watched as these two French divisions just took the fuck off. But these Highlanders chose to hold their ground and fight. On April 24th, the Germans launch a gas attack on this Canadian line where these Highlanders are. And the Canadians, not equipped with gas masks, pissed into their handkerchiefs and breathed through them. They pissed in their handkerchiefs and then held it to their fucking face and breathed through it. There's something that has to do with the ammonia, I guess, or something of the pee. Your pee does something, because you think that this isn't going to fucking work. What are these guys doing? But whoever come up with this idea was brilliant, because later, when they started restocking these guys, or like getting the supply chains and stuff to them, while they were getting proper gas masks, they would hand out paper gas masks with cotton pads, and they were like pee on these pads and put them on, and they would work to an extent. I don't know. I'm not a fucking chemist. When I was a kid, I had a chemistry set, and I scorched the ceiling one time, and like no matter what you would do, you couldn't get it to wash off. Like, it was wild. And I could make rubber. I could make these like an egg into like rubber that you could like bounce like a ball. I don't know if that's basic or not. I can't remember. I think you just soak it in vinegar. Anyhow, I loved having a chemistry set. I liked like making blue fire and stuff. That was awesome. Anyhow, what the fuck am I talking about? Oh yeah, they were pissing in their handkerchiefs and breathing through them. Despite the efforts, the Germans eventually took the village of Saint Julien. They kept using the gas, and eventually at one point in time, there was a 1,500-yard gap in the line. The problem is that the Germans, even though they had gas masks, they feared this gas. And they were not quick enough. They were not quick to advance behind the gas as the gas was moving along. And this led to the English and Canadians were able to take back their positions before the Germans could settle in. In the end of it all, the Allies prevailed, even with the use of this bullshit gas. But it must have seemed like hell to these guys to go through, like this pale yellow gas, dudes dying all over the place, fires, and you got dirt everywhere, and there's like concertina wire and barbed wire and like blood in the mud and all this. It must have seemed a lot like hell. And like you really don't have any place to run to. Wherever you go, you have to breathe. Now that they can like poison this air around you, like what are you supposed to do? Where are you supposed to go? It wasn't long after this battle that rumors started circulating about a crucified soldier on the battlefield. That's where we're going to pick up. Okay, so news or rumors started to make it home of a Canadian soldier crucified to a barn door with German bayonets. England would use this story as propaganda to raise money. And as the story grew, the folks at home started to wonder if it was their son, husband, or brother who died being hung on the barn door with these German bayonets. One letter home read, hold on. One letter home reads, I heard tales of friends crucified on barn doors, of wounded men bayoneted while sleeping lying on the ground. Talk of these atrocities make me feel quite bitter against the enemy. Another letter home reads, a Canadian officer came in here the other day and stated that after an attack, he and his men found a man crucified in a barn. Fortunately, he caught 4 German soldiers in that barn too. I am thankful for the Canadians killed all 4 out of hand. So sometime later, like a year or so, it was a year after Elizabeth Petrie, whose brother was listed as missing. This is Sergeant Harry Bands. After the battle, he was listed missing after the Battle of Ypres. Receives a letter from Private William Freeman saying that her brother died a hero. But the lack of detail and some suspicion made her write back and ask the private if her brother was the crucified soldier. I don't know why she would just think that. I imagine maybe everyone thought that. Like if you were just missing, there was always that in the back of your head that maybe my dude was the dude that was crucified. Anyway, giant leap in intuition for Elizabeth. Private William Freeman responded back. And he says, I am very sorry to say that it is perfectly true that Harry was crucified. But whether he was alive at the time, I don't think anyone can say for sure. When I wrote to you to inform you of Harry's death, I didn't tell you the horrible details. I thought it best not to tell you. Tell you how they found him. It would have only caused more worry, and I did it for the best. As other soldiers have told you, I expect. You know all about it now. I think Harry must have thought a lot about you because he was always good to his men, and he always saw that his platoon got everything that was coming to them. He treated everyone the same and never had any favorites. You must miss him dreadfully. Private William Freeman. So Elizabeth must have been in contact with other soldiers who were in the know, as she writes. She writes her other brother Martin, to notifying him of her discovery. Elizabeth Petrie writes to her brother Martin. She says, I got it at last. The horrible details. Don't tell Bertha them all. I told her he was crucified, but they took him down alive, and he was hacked to bits and spat on, and his eyes were out. Oh, Martin, think of it. And the War Office has never notified me. Okay, so that family kept the story in the letters a secret for many, many years. And after the war, the Germans pleaded for the stories of the atrocities to stop being told. And somehow they did. Even the rape of Belgium was eventually disputed and or eventually forgotten. and also, for a time, they were unbelieved. But now let us take a moment To think of this wounded Canadian sergeant being pinned up to a barn door by bayonets, hacked up alive, Germans surrounding him, spitting on him, laughing at him, and taking his eyes from him. So, yeah, I mean, what do you think? Do you buy this story of the crucified soldier? Or do you think it's just hogwash or just a rumor that made it home? I don't know. I don't know.
Stigmata Studios presents The Scorpion Strikes. In this comic book, a terrorist called the Scorpion is transported to a secret CIA prison. He quickly turns the tables on the guards and administrators and releases the prisoners. A well-armed anarchist called Constituent Zero assembles a team and fights to take the prison back. This story is a dark political action thriller. The Scorpion's actions set the stage perfectly for the Jin Jihad. Available on Indie Planet. Get more info on The Scorpion Strikes, the Jin Jihad, and other titles at stigmatastudios.com. Stigmata Studios presents The Test of the Scorpion. In this comic book, while the Jin Jihad is raging on one side of the city, the terrorist called the Scorpion sets a secondary attack in motion as he obtains a small tactical nuclear bomb. A mysterious, ever-living warrior called Cyrus the Dead Guy steps forward to test the faith of the Scorpion and his lunatic followers. This is an action-adventure story. It's a bit of swashbuckler that wraps up the Jihad stories. Available on Indie Planet. Get more info on The Scorpion Strikes, the Jin Jihad, The Test of the Scorpion, and other titles at stigmatastudios.com.
Please support the show. Go to stigmatastudios.com, buy some books. If you want to buy some books, you can share the show on social media. That's a great free way to support the show. You can also rate and review on iTunes. Please rate and review. Just rate or just review. If it takes too long to do both. Or wherever you get the show, Stitcher or whatnot. And that's the show, everybody. Sorry it's short this week, but like I said, you know what I said. Like I said, fuck this. And I'm out of here.